Welcome to use case number 7. This use case is going to focus on how you can mount volumes from within the container to your local hard drive. A good example of this would be, let's say the running container was generating logs. For example, your war application could generate logs. Let's say you wanted to view the logs without having to log in into the container. Or else if you've had multiple containers running on the same machine, what would happen if the container had to die down? You would definitely need a copy of the logs. So let's get into understanding how to mount volumes. Let's open up Visual Studio Code, drill down into use case number 7. As you can see, there is a war file here, a Docker file. If you see the Docker file, this is the image which we generated as a part of use case 5 and 6, which is housed in our Docker Hub. We are copying the Docker war file from this location onto our web apps directory. All of this is basically setting the environment variables in the container. You're exposing 2 ports. We went through all of this before, so I'm not going to repeat it. This is the most important instruction of this Docker file, which is it basically states and tells Docker engine that I want to be able to expose this and mount it to a local hard drive. Okay, so the work directory is the directory where all the instruction sets are run, and the command basically says I'm going to be running Tomcat when the container starts up. So let's take a look at this. Let's open scripts.txt. Let's open PowerShell. Navigate to the use case directory. So I'm just going to do copy path. You'll do the same thing in the Mac. And then I'm going to run this command. The image is successfully built. So let's go back, copy Docker images, make sure the image was built correctly. As you can see, Springcat MVC Tomcat 7 JDK 7 volume sample. Now what we're going to do is to run the container. Now before we run the container, let's take a look at the command. The command until here is probably very familiar to you. I'm still going to use -p just to make it easier, and I'm going to say 3333:80. And then what we see is -v. The -v basically maps the logs directory. So as you can see, I'm mapping a Windows directory here. Some things to note is that I'm not using a backward slash, I'm using a forward slash, very similar to the Unix machine. And for Macintosh, you will still do the same thing. And then after a colon, I'm actually doing opt tomcat logs. So what I'm going to do here is basically, I'm going to be able to copy this once again. And I'm also going to route the web apps directory. As you can see in the Docker file, we are trying to mount the web apps directory as well. So I just wanted to show you live. So before we start and execute this command, one very important thing to note here is we have a -v and then again a -v. These two are the 2 volumes which you're going to map. And I'm also going to copy this section here into here. So this is the host port, and this is the container port. And you can have as many -v's as you want. So before we get started and execute this command, there's one important step to be done. Let me go over that. Since this exercise requires mounting of volumes, go into the Docker daemon, go to the settings of the Docker daemon, click on the shared drives, click on the F drive, and select apply. In most cases, in Windows, it would complain. In case of the Mac, it should be just fine. It'll complain as follows. It'll say firewall detected. So what you will need to do is to go back into Norton Security or your antivirus. Go into the settings, and you should see a small smart firewall option. Just uncheck this. Set a duration of at least an hour so that you can work on it. Click OK. Close. Close. Check on this option again. Click apply. Sometimes it'll ask you for your Windows user ID and password. So just key in the user ID and password. So we are all set. So just close this. Go back to the Visual Studio Code. Make sure that you have these two directories, which you've specified, which you're going to specify as host mounts. In my case, I made sure that there are two directories, one called logs and the other called web apps, exactly at the same directory location as specified in the Docker file, in the scripts file. Make sure this is / in case you're using Windows. And if you're using Mac, it's pretty much the same thing, except that you'll not have a drive name. So let's go into the directory. Logs, there's nothing in here. As far as web apps, this is a very important thing to know. Let's say you're spawning multiple containers which want to use the same WAR file. What you can do is you can create a mount and have all of those containers mount to this drive and pick up the WAR file from here. So what I'm going to do is, as you can see, I removed the copy command which I had to copy the WAR file into the web apps directory. I'm just going to drag it and put it in here. And then I'm just going to go back to scripts, copy this particular section here, paste it, and run the container. So the container is running right now. Let's go back to the drive. As you can see, this WAR file was exploded. Now let's go take a look at the logs directory. As you can see, the log files are getting generated. These log files are nothing but the log files mounted inside the container. So if you go back and hit the page, now remember, you need to specify the name of the WAR file. So in this case, it's going to be So that's about it. So you learn two things. One is to be able to mount logs, and the next thing is to be able to mount a directory which has the WAR file which multiple containers can use. Just to quickly summarize, we saw how to mount the logs of the WAR file. One good practice to do this would be to log the files with the container name on it. So if you're using log4j or slf4j, just make sure that you log the host name. The container host name will be different all the time. So that way, even if you're mapping it to the same volume, the logs won't get garbled, and you'd be able to identify which log pertains to which container. And I'm sure you're going to be using rolling file appenders or rotating file appenders as far as gzipping it when the day is done and it rolls over to the next day, or if the size exceeds a certain value. The next one to be aware of is to be able to mount the WAR file to a directory. This way all containers can refer to that directory. A change in the WAR file there would automatically start refreshing the other containers. In most cases, people don't do that in production, but in the development and QA, I think it is okay to do it. So I'll let you experiment with it. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. I look forward to the next one. Thank you.